Faith Kipyegon is the mile and 1500 meter world record holder, a 3-time Olympic champion and 3-time world champion in the distance, as well as holding 6 Diamond League title finals. She also is the defending 5000 meter world champion and an Olympic silver medalist in the 5K. There is no doubt the Kenyan is the greatest female middle distance athlete ever, with no real challenges to her dominance. And recently, her and her sponsor Nike announced that she will be trying to become the first woman ever to break the sub 4 minute mile. Roger Bannister famously became the first man to break the mark in 1954, and the time has now been run by hundreds of elite runners. But as of right now, no woman has even got close to the mark, with Kipyegon's world record being a 4:07.64. Nike of course have got a decent track record in achieving seemingly impossible goals, as they orchestrated the Ineos 159 challenge, where Eliud Kipchoge became the first person to run a marathon in under 2 hours. Although the conditions the event was run in, such as the course, shoes and pacer setup, prevented it from being an official world record, it was still a monumental achievement for human performance. But despite Nike's previous experiences and Kipyegon's utter dominance in her distance, most people are seriously doubting she will even get close to running sub 4. For one, her PB and world record in the mile is almost 8 seconds off the required mark. The percentage improvement required is around 3.25%. For reference, Kipchoge's improvement when he broke the 2-hour barrier was 1.75%, which means Kipyegon requires nearly double the rate of improvement from her PB. That is huge. What's more, Kipchoge was able to achieve this improvement largely because there are many more factors that can be influenced to boost performance in a longer event like the marathon. Eliminating elevation in sharp corners, super shoes, a pacing formation that lasts for 2 hours. A mile is already run on a perfect course on the track and is simply too short for other factors to have as much of an effect. What's more, Kipyegon recently tried and failed to break Svetlana Mastukova's long-standing 1000 meter world record for the 3rd time in the Shanghai Diamond League. This record, at a 2:28.98, converts exactly to 4-minute mile pace, and Kipyegon still could not hold that for less than 2/3 of the distance. With all this in mind, it seems incredibly unlikely that Kipyegon is going to break the 4-minute mile, or even come close for that matter. Most people seem to think she can shave 3 to 4 seconds off her PB, but sub 4 is a long way off. But this just shows how immense of an achievement it will be for running, and women's running especially, if she were to run that 3:59 time. This video is not meant to be a prediction or a piece trying to convince you that Kipyegon can run the time. It is instead meant to explore what a world where she does run sub 4 looks like. Because one thing I do wonder is why Nike and her would have announced this if they did not have a solid plan in mind. It wouldn't look great for either of them if she tries her best and runs a 4:05, even though that is a substantial improvement on the current world record. I would like to think that her and Nike know what they're doing with this. So with this in mind, how might Faith Kipyegon break the sub 4-minute mile? Let's first look at the way she can improve her time unassisted by Nike. We can then get into the more significant aspects of how Nike can tweak the conditions to improve her performance outside of World Athletics guidelines. Here is footage of Kipyegon's mile world record that she set in the Monaco Diamond League in 2023. As amazing a feat as it is, there are ways she could have gone even faster. For one, the pacer started off way too hot, leaving a 4 to 5 meter gap between them and Faith. This obviously reduces her ability to draft off them effectively, and it may have thrown off her mental game slightly given how useful pacers are when trying to break records. Although they do slow down somewhat, it's fair to say the pacing left a lot to be desired. Looking at the splits as well, she had a really strong last lap, indicating 2 things. 1. She may have had more energy left in the tank on that actual day. And looking at her reaction after the race, this seems like a pretty reasonable assumption. I mean, does this look like someone who has exhausted every bit of energy she has? I know the adrenaline would kick in after breaking a world record, but come on. And even if we assume she left everything on the track, it's possible she could have gone even faster with an even pacing strategy, as that is typically the most efficient way to run a race. This is also true with her 1500 world record, which ranks slightly higher than her mile time in the World Athletics point scale and was run with significant negative splits as well. Another momental factor is that she destroyed everyone in the mile race and even beat the previous world record of 4:12.33 by Sifan Hassan by 5 seconds. So unlike with the sub 4 mile, Kipyegon did not have that extra urgency to run faster that you might have with some real competition or a truly challenging time. Finally, it's worth noting that Kipyegon has likely gotten fitter since her 2023 campaign. Even though she fell short of the 1000 meter world record and her own PB in the distance, it was a poorly ran race as she started off far too conservative. Then if you account for the fact that she ran this in early May, when most athletes are still working on getting into their peak shape, her time is arguably more impressive given her previous attempt was in the peak months of August. Plus, runners tend to improve after 2 years of extra training. That's kind of how it works. But even if we account for all of these factors, it seems hard to think that she would reduce her time by that much. Maybe 2 or 3 seconds if we're being generous, but not 8. So now we go on to the more controversial but effective means Nike could use to bolster Kipyegon's performance, for which there are probably two big ones. The first, of course, is the shoes, or in this case the spikes that will be the big factor. We have seen how much of a boost super shoes have had on recent performances, and although this is true to a lesser extent with spikes, it is still definitely an important factor. Given it seems unlikely that this race will be attempted under World Athletics guidelines, Nike will probably be designing some disgusting super spike for her that can shave off a percent or two from our race. Probably something like the Nike Dragon Vapor Alpha Giga Max Pro Super Victory Elite Fly 359 Premium Faith Kipyegon Edition. That said, it is possible that they also keep it legal so they can better take advantage of the spike sales from this. I mean, the Ineos 159 was a massive advert for their Alpha Fly 2s, to the point where you see most new runners wearing them these days, despite the price tag and frankly the lack of necessity for them for most newbies. The spike market is much more niche, but the shoe that allowed Faith Kipyegon to break the sub 4 minute mile has a nice ring to it and would definitely drive sales. They can also tailor the exact shoe to Kipyegon's stride and build, as we have seen some reasonable variance in the effectiveness of super shoes relative to an athlete's individual biomechanics. For instance, the switch from the Vaporfly to the Alphafly was potentially a contributing factor to Ruud Kipniewicz's sub 2:10 marathon, and athletes have spoken about having particular preferences for various shoes. The other method that is likely to be the main contributor to the drop time is drafting strategy. Drafting has been a large part of world records, with pacers often having the dual purpose of setting the athlete off at the correct speed and giving them a shield from the wind. Part of what made Kipchoge's 159 illegal was the diamond-shaped formation of pacers that would switch out every 5 kilometers for maximum freshness, and this allowed him to gain a significant performance boost as the formation was specifically designed to give him as much shielding from the wind as possible. The formation underwent change from the first sub 2 hour attempt with the Nike Breaking 2 project, and seemed to have helped Kipchoge a lot. It is also another factor that seems to have helped Kipniewic run her world record, as she drafted behind 2 male pacers for the entire race. The big talk right now is around this paper though, which argues that if specific drafting strategies were employed during Kipyegon's mile world record, she could potentially save around 8 seconds of time. Now this paper has a lot of theory and maths that frankly goes over my head, but here is my basic understanding of how they arrived at that conclusion. They started off by calculating Kipyegon's total metabolic power or energy consumption during her mile world record. They then applied a formula to see how much speed she could gain if she was not using her energy fighting against resistive forces, mostly wind resistance. Her drag was estimated based on her frontal surface area and the conditions of the actual race. They then used 2 studies which measure drafting effectiveness on runners using different pacer formations. One study used wind tunnel data with mannequins and found a maximum of 39.5% drafting efficiency, with 1.3 meter spacing between the pacer and the target athlete. The other used computer simulations and found much higher drafting effectiveness, with up to 75% in certain formations. Finally, they applied the improved drafting efficiency from both studies to see if Kipyegon would have broken the sub 4 mile on that day with a better drafting formation. Under the first study with less drafting efficiency, Kipyegon would have only run a 4:03 mile, but under the computer simulation study, she would have run a 3:59.37 mile if the pacers kept the most efficient formation. The most effective formation had 2 runners, one in front and one behind her, each 1.2 meters away from the target runner. Front runner of course blocks the incoming wind, but the back runner has a more nuanced role. When someone runs, they push through the air and leave a low pressure turbulent zone behind them. This zone slightly pulls them backwards, adding to the total drag one has to overcome. But if there's a runner close behind someone, their body disturbs and fills that turbulent wake, which helps push some of the air back towards the athlete, reducing the suction effect and overall drag. Now it's important to remember, this is all theoretical. The authors didn't scan Kipyegon's body or measure her drag in a wind tunnel. They used respected equations and scaling methods to estimate everything based on the findings of other studies. It's also worth noting that she only breaks 4 under one of these studies, and the authors are unclear which is more accurate to real world conditions. Their work supports the idea that Kipyegon can break a sub 4 minute mile with the correct drafting strategies, but given the lack of specific data, it's hard to conclusively say. We also need to factor in that this is the best case scenario for her. She needs to pace her race perfectly, as do the pacers who need to stay very close to her at all times. Wavelights and the laser technology in the Ineos challenge will help, but maintaining the exact pace and formation will still be a key part of the attempt. Even then, it's likely she won't be able to perfectly convert all of that saved energy into running faster. I do wonder as well if they're going to use male or female pacers for this. Of course, male pacers will be able to keep the pace comfortably and not need to swap out halfway through. They will also be bigger and therefore more effective at taking the air resistance. But I feel like whilst this is an achievement for running in general, it is specifically a feat in women's distance running, so it would be nice to see an all-female team pull this off, even if that makes the challenge even harder. I don't care much on what they do, but I will be curious to see how Nike frames it. This does lead me on to a final point, which is more a discussion on how people feel about this attempt in general. It is undoubtedly a spectacle and will be a monumental achievement even if Kipyegon falls short but still knocks a few seconds off her world record. But I think there is a question to be asked on the point of these attempts given how much support is going to be needed from technology and external pacers. Playing devil's advocate, why don't we put Kipyegon on a downhill course in 10cm thick super shoes and see if she can break a sub 4 minute mile? I think most people would agree that it would not have the same weight to it if that was Nike's plan, because of course she only did it on the shoes, or she only did it because she was running downhill. Maybe it's an extreme example, but given that such a large majority of the time shaven off our current world record seems to come from a drafting formation, it does feel kind of weird to think about. I will still tune in to watch and celebrate if she does get close or even breaks the mark, but there is a big asterisk around the time. And hopefully as well it can be good for the sport's viewership, which is something we all like to talk about. But let me know your thoughts on this as well, because I'm kind of conflicted about it. If you want to see a video on the potential candidates for who will break the sub 2 hour marathon in a legal race, then click on this video here. If you want to see a video on how Ruth Chepnyetic achieved the first ever sub 2:10 marathon, then click on this video here. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Happy training.